Hello, welcome to Music of the Armenian Liturgy. My name is Armenia Sarkisian, and this is a special week for Motal because not only do we have another wonderful guest, but we are starting our Komidas series. Today we'll be focusing on part 1 of Komidas' biography with a little treat at the end, and tomorrow I'll be releasing a second video which features my interview with the lovely and knowledgeable Reverend Narek Karapetyan from Chicago, wherein we discuss the subject of this week's study, the Meriti Bandarialet. So stay tuned for all of that, and let's jump into part 1 of Komidas. To avoid skipping important details of his life, I'm going to be breaking this up into 3 episodes and 3 parts. I don't want to do a condensed version of his biography because all the little details of his life mattered, and they shaped the great person that he was. I'm certainly not an expert on Komidas, but because of my love for him and for what he's done for the Armenians, I've certainly read a lot about him, and I want to use this platform to share what I've learned so far. I know a lot of you are very familiar with the overarching themes in his life, but would like to be better acquainted with the details of his personhood. So we're going to begin this series with childhood and innate musicality. In the next segment, we'll discuss education and achievements, and then we'll end the series with tragedy and transcendence. At the Cherents Museum of Literature and Art in Yerevan, Armenia, there are several of Komidas' handwritten autobiographies. In the one dated June 24, 1908, Komidas states, "I was born on September 26, 1869 in Kitaya in Asia Minor. On the 3rd day of my life, I was baptized and named Soromon. My father, George Soromonyan, was from Kitaya, and my mother, Takui Hovanesyan from Bursa. Both are Armenians. My parents came from families of naturally gifted singers. My father and uncle were well-known cantors from the St. Theodoros local church. My mother and father composed songs with Turkish texts that are still sung with admiration by the older generation of our town. I transcribed some of them in 1893 in my hometown. My mother died in 1870, and my father in 1880. After the death of my parents, my education and upbringing were overseen by my paternal grandmother, Mariam." In the wonderful book and tremendous resource, Komidas, Victim of a Great Crime, Meline Karakashian writes, "We know that Turkey was plagued by famine in the second half of the 19th century, and that Armenian children roamed the streets before orphanages were founded. In 1873 to 1874, the peak of the famine, Komidas was 4 or 5 years old. Even if his family had been wealthy, they may have lost everything during the famine, contributing to Komidas' popular association with poverty. He was sent to the Ichmiadzin monastery as an orphan, deprived of relatives. There is no doubt that he was an orphan, but whether he felt homeless and without family is a topic for further study. Some have tried to find a reflection of his emotions in his folk song Anduni, meaning homeless. Among the noteworthy accounts of Komidas' contemporaries is that of his classmate N. Mildonian, quoted by H. Haranyan in 1949. Mildonian states, "Soromon was a poor boy. He was of thin build, meager, and pale, hands always in his pocket. In the winter, his condition was even more pitiful. He came to school disheveled, half full, half starving. In the mornings, he waited for me in front of their door, and we went to school together. Whether in the cold of winter or the heat of summer, we students sat on wooden planks and studied. Desks did not exist then. We would spread soft pillows under us, but Soromon used to sit on the totally bare floor with his legs folded under, and he would read, shivering, always warming his frozen hands with his breath. His miserable orphanhood was worthy of pity. Nevertheless, there were mischievous lads that often tormented him for small reasons, making him cry with a barrage of snowballs. When he was with me, I protected him within my abilities. Sometimes we beat other boys, sometimes they beat us, depending on the place and circumstances. I always insisted he eat from my lunch bag, and generally I showed courage while standing up for him. And I demanded for him to sing with his beautiful voice for my charity, which he never refused. The charm of his voice soon spread in the city. They no longer beat Soromon. who, recognizing the impact of his voice whenever he felt an attack or animosity, immediately began to sing as a powerful defense weapon and salvation that immediately disarmed the most mischievous lads. Whenever he sang, large crowds gathered, Armenian, Turk, and Greek, and they listened to his thunderous voice with admiration. So many times I saw him famished, or crying and sobbing plaintively. He was so pitiful that I too would cry. Soghomon became even more miserable after the death of his father. Oftentimes he did not want to go home, and I assumed that his relatives did not like his pitiful orphan's condition, and they did not want to care for him. He belonged to the streets then, and often slept in public laundries. People felt sorry for him and helped him on occasion, but no solution was permanent. His relatives were barely able to give him a piece of dry bread. They too bore heavy burdens. Another contemporary, Father Matthias Hekimian, remembered Soghomon's words during a walk they took together in the gardens of Echmiadzin. After losing his father, his primary caretaker was his aunt, Guline Karakashian, who was not only a widow with one child, but had to suffer the utter misfortune of losing her eyesight. Thus Soghomon, ignored by all human eyes, deprived of care and nurture, was abandoned to his ill fate. During the day, he attended the National Primary School's kindergarten, where he learned reading and writing from a Turkish-speaking teacher. He started singing in the church as a scribe, and on Sundays, whatever he learned from the Armenian Liturgy, he would sing outside with his beautiful and natural voice without understanding the language. Every day after school, Soghomon played in the streets until nightfall. Tired from playing, he would enter his blind aunt's home and eat whatever dry bread he could find and sleep on a special bed laid out for him on the floor. Some days after school, he was so tired from playing that, forgetting his hunger, he would sleep under the roof of a nearby home and wait there until dawn. To finish off this episode, I'm going to insert a recording of Komidas Vartapet singing. This CD is a compilation of rare French recordings made in 1912 in Paris by Komitas and a few others who recorded secular and religious songs. I am going to link it below if you're curious to check it out or to buy it, but thanks so much for tuning in, and don't forget to check out tomorrow's episode of Under Yalet and my interview with Reverend Narek Karapetyan. Here is the voice of Komidas Vartapet.
Oh,